Welcome into the PHNX Suns podcast, brought to you by our friends at the DraftKings Sportsbook app, America's top-rated sportsbook app. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review. We greatly appreciate your support. I'm Lindsey Smith. That's Saul Bookman. That's Gerald Bourguet. Gentlemen, it was a two-day weekend for us. No games recently because the All-Star break is in full swing. The NBA All-Star game was last night. Did you guys take it in? How'd you enjoy it?
2 days off.
Yeah.
When they break that news yesterday, I was like, son of a bitch.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into that a little bit more later in the show.
That's the worst part about it is like, you knew it was coming. You're like, come on, like Suns, NBA, just let us have the day, please. You could have broke it this morning. No big deal.
Or
no.
Friday.
Or Saturday when they...
Or Thursday.
He got the MRI Friday morning, so it's not like they didn't know.
Yeah, I guess it was Friday morning, wasn't it?
That's when he flew to LA and got the MRI, but we found out, like an hour before the All-Star game, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Which if you want to go and kind of vent it out a little bit, the podcast before this with Saul and Espo, they kind of broke that down a little bit. And like I said, we'll get into that later on in the show, but because it's been covered quite a bit, we'll hold that off until the end. And let's talk about the NBA All-Star game, because we did have some representation out there this year. Devin Booker and Chris Paul were both in attendance and participated. Obviously, with that injury, Chris Paul only played a handful of minutes, didn't do anything too extreme. I personally don't have a problem with Chris Paul playing. I think he's a pro's pro. He knows best, and he wouldn't have done anything that really put him in harm's way. Plus, both teams knew he was injured. They weren't going to intentionally try and mess that up any worse.
There wasn't a guy out there that wasn't conscious about what was going on with CP3 and wanted to be that dude to try and steal the ball or play defense on him in a way that would cause significant harm. Like, nobody wanted to be that guy. And plus, like, there's something special about the NBA fraternity, and when they understand those kind of things, like, listen, they're out there to put on a show. The fans want to see them. There's not a lot of defense being played in the first place anyway. Just let him live his life for a couple minutes, to say he played in the game and then move on.
Yeah, I was laughing at Nick's comment in the chat. A handful of minutes. Got to hand it to him. That was pretty funny. Sorry, Shane. But yeah, he played 2 minutes. Like, it's not a big deal. He didn't do anything. He barely dribbled the ball. It's fine. I'm glad he got to check in there, even if it was just kind of like a curtain call type deal.
My thought on it, too, is that he probably realizes, he's coming to the tail end of his career. Who knows what the next couple of years might look like for him. It might be time for him to pass the torch to a younger, up-and-coming all-star in the league. You just never know. So I think at this point in a career like that, you really want to take advantage of every opportunity and every special moment that you can to really just have those memories, especially being the 75th anniversary and the amount of history that was in the building at that time. He wanted to be a part of that, and I get it.
That's the main reason. I think we all kind of forgot about that when we were asking whether or not he was going to play in the All-Star game. And then once you realized it was the 75th anniversary and he was on that team, there's no shot he was going to miss the All-Star game at all. Like, I don't give a fuck if my left arm was completely broken. I'm still going to play. You know what I mean? Like, and you're going to be there for that moment. And what a moment that was to see all those greats out there and them all just, being one big frat, essentially. That was probably one of the cooler things I've seen really in the last couple of years.
It was the longest halftime show ever, but it was totally worth it. I would have rather seen that than DJ Khaled performing for 25 minutes. But and also we should mention the inaugural award that he won, the Kobe and Gigi WNBA Advocacy Award. Like, he had plenty of reasons to want to be there, and I'm glad he got to play, because who knows if this is, I don't think it's his last All-Star game, but it could be.
You just never know.
Yeah.
You just never know. So may as well take advantage of the opportunities as they come. But let's talk about Devin Booker, because he did actually play, like legitimately play in the All-Star game. Of course, Team LeBron ultimately won 163-160. But our guy, Devin Booker, he played 30 minutes. He logged 20 points on 50% shooting. He had 4 steals, 2 assists, and 5 rebounds. My favorite moment from this game was when Chris and Devin were kind of going toe-to-toe, and Devin did that little fake rip-through on him. I thought that was adorable.
I mean, it was adorable.
It was great.
That's one way to put it. It was adorable.
Just got you there.
I was stumped. I was like, I don't think I've ever heard a play be called adorable before, and
if there
I don't
was
know
ever
what to
a play
say.
to be called adorable, it'd be that one because you know it was all playful. It was in like good fun.
Yeah,
it was adorable.
I remember Espo texted me around halftime saying, should we do an emergency pod if Devin Booker wins the MVP? And I said, he's not winning MVP. And the reason why is because there's that other dude over there that just hit 5 straight threes. And he just looks like he's going to own the moment. And he sure did with 45 and 15 threes. I wish I thought Devin had a good shot at it for a little bit because he was balling. He was playing good.
Yeah.
They
left him in for a long time too.
Then that Curry guy.
Then he hit 16 threes and scored 50 points, and then that was over with. Yeah. But no, it was good. It was good to see him not only, like we all talked about how he was the first pick for Kevin Durant among the reserves, and then for him to be on the floor in closing time. Like the players are pretty much the ones who decide who's going to be on the floor in closing time. So for him to have that respect from the players is pretty cool to see. Even if he started 7 of 10 and then he kind of cooled off, but it was fun to see him get extended minutes at least.
Devin played the second most on his team. So Joel Embiid had 31 minutes. Devin had 30 minutes. And then on Team LeBron, you had LeBron and Steph obviously logged 36 minutes in that game. So the fact that he was able to, because I feel like I should have looked up the numbers from not last year because he didn't play, but the year before, the first time he played in an All-Star game. I can't remember him seeing that much playing time. It was almost like, oh yeah, you're just down there.
It was like 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I was like, put Devin in the game. Come on, bro.
Oh, yeah.
But we actually got to see Devin in the game this time, which was great. Like you said, he did miss a couple of those 3-pointers there late in the game, which would have been nice if he would have knocked those down. But there were some really cool highlights from this one, like that one-handed jam.
Yeah,
that was
alley-oop was great. That was beautiful. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see Suns get the recognition, even if he should have been starting. I think Fabio mentioned it, that Draymond brought it up on the broadcast that he should have been starting, and that's kind of like an unintentional slap in his own teammate's face because we all know who shouldn't have been starting if Devin Booker should have been, but I digress.
I mean, I feel like Draymond would straight up say that too. He'd be like, if it wasn't for the fan vote, there's no reason this guy over here should be starting over you.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000,000%.
He would be honest about it.
He basically said it during the game.
Yeah.
Like, you should have been starting. Like, well, if there's one player out here that shouldn't be starting, who would it be there, Draymond? Yeah, your own teammate. That's why.
Yeah. But it was a fun game overall. One thing that came out of it that I thought was really interesting was on the broadcast. They said Chris Paul had a hand in the whole target score format.
You're really liking that pun right now.
He had a hand in.
You know, I can't help it.
Give her a hand, folks.
It just comes naturally. What other like ism would you put there?
I gotta hand it to you. You're playing it well. There you go.
The fingers are all pointing at Chris Paul.
Mercy. Chris Paul played a role in the target score format for All-Star, for the All-Star game, and dang it, my other little thing was I love how he's got a thumbprint on so much of this. And this was all legitimately unintentional. Lord have mercy. No. But it is kind of neat because we found out just a couple weeks ago, Chris Paul also was one of the people who pushed to have the draft televised. Then this format for the All-Star game, like, if you're talking about history and just kind of how we were talking about the 75th anniversary and how much history was in that building, Chris Paul is going to go down as one of those players that really had an impact on this league.
You know, if he didn't have a role at the in the Players Association for so long, I would see a path where Chris Paul would work for the league.
Yeah, I can
in terms of you know, I don't know if game management is the right thing to say, but the aesthetics of the game and how the game should be played and what structure some of these events should have, because he's really in tune with that. And I think there's been times, you know, obviously we got into this business because we fell in love with watching the game and the game itself. And there's not anybody out there that hasn't watched the game and be like, you know what, it'd be nice if they did this or did this.
Right.
And Chris Paul can actually have an influence on whether or not they do that. And I think that's really cool. And that's the cool thing about learning more about Chris Paul, because he's a Phoenix Sun, and seeing how his mind works and all the things that have come out in the last couple of years. That makes me appreciate him so much more than I think I ever have before. I just didn't appreciate Chris Paul until he got here, to be honest with you. I just didn't appreciate him. And you really don't appreciate him until you see him every single day, every single night. And then you see the other nuances of Chris Paul and what he's really into and what he does off the court with the HBCU stuff, you know, the voting, you know, pushing for like the Kobe stuff. Like, he's a phenomenal individual. He really is.
Yeah, I mean, he's involved with so much on and off the court that's advancing the game of basketball at almost every stage. It's incredible just how much of himself he's willing to give to all these various different things. Not to mention, you know, being the teammate and the point guard and just the all-around player that he is on the court. So, yeah, I completely agree. I feel like if it wasn't for the Players Association thing, because he definitely cares more for the players than the actual league itself, which makes sense because it's a brotherhood, and he's one of the leading faces of that kind of idea. So, yeah, I feel like he's definitely going to be involved with the league in some capacity once his playing days are over, but it'll be interesting to see what
now if he can convince some dudes that should be in the dunk contest to be in the dunk contest.
Please, for the love of God,
that would be great, because
bad.
that was awful.
There were like 5 dunks in the actual All-Star game that were better than anything that was in the slam dunk contest.
John Morant should have been in the slam dunk contest. Like, that guy's bounce is ridiculous. That's the other part of this, is like superstars, I feel like, are missing out on an opportunity to really take their own brand to another level. And there's no contest really besides the dunk and the three that will do that more than anything. You know, like, I can remember guys in the past. I mean, Larry Bird, you know, did the whole shooting the 3-pointer, holding the finger up. And that's like one of the most iconic moments in NBA history. Like, that's what set the tone for the 3-point contest to move forward. You know what I mean? And then you move like Jordan and Dominique, like, they established their own brands at a much higher level because it was an individual, you know, opportunity to do so. And they took advantage of it multiple times. And so I wish today's athlete and today's NBA player would realize that. And Zach LaVine is not Zach LaVine until the slam dunk contest. People knew he was good, but the dunk contest took him to another level in terms of popularity amongst NBA fans. Like, I wish players understood that. And not that John Morant needs that, but again, like, he can separate himself from the pack. He can sell so many more jerseys and brand himself so much more in terms of his own individual revenue if he took advantage of that opportunity, because I think he would probably win it.
Okay, 2 follow-up questions. One, did some of these superstars turn down the invitation this year, or were they even asked? Do we know?
If John Morant says, I want to be in the slam dunk contest, he's going to be in the slam dunk contest.
Right.
The NBA is not saying no to that.
Okay.
So it's not that they were asked and they turned it down. They just didn't want to volunteer to do it.
Okay. Then secondly, do you think that that's a way of them kind of giving some limelight to other players in the league?
No.
I think it is, but I think it's by default, because I think we've gotten to the point where star players would rather be on the sidelines getting gift or memed as reactions to the dunk contest than being in the actual dunk contest. Like, I'll never forgive LeBron for never being in the slam dunk contest, because I would rather see mediocre or okay dunks from superstars than these ambitious dunks that they can't even finish from a bunch of no-name guys.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is if you have superstars that say no or don't want to be in the slam dunk contest, and you have mid to lower level players that are in the slam dunk contest, those mid to lower level players better show out at a crazy level that people don't even remember the fact that the superstars weren't in it.
Right.
But this one definitely was not like that. It was terrible. I don't even know who the hell was in it, to be honest.
I'll be honest, I didn't watch it. I was at Sarah's
I didn't watch it
wedding.
either. Didn't watch it either. I saw the highlights and I was like, man, I'm glad I didn't watch that.
I watched all freaking hour and a half of it, and it was awful. And I kept hoping that, like, maybe one of these dunks will be cool. And I literally realized at the end of it, I'm not going to remember a single one of these dunks tomorrow morning. Like it was legitimately the worst slam dunk contest.
Our guy Mega Ran was there, and he took a screen or a recording of I forgot who it was that left. He did a dunk, missed it, and then Kareem gets up and walks out.
Yeah,
and he's like, embarrassing the ancestors is what was his tag was.
No.
And it went viral, and ESPN took it and used it today. So like it just was not a great performance, especially on the 75th anniversary. Again, like this was the time for the big dogs to get out there and show them what they got.
Yep.
Okay, Chris brings up a point in the chat. The way the dunk contest has been judged lately turned players off. Do you agree or disagree?
Dwayne Wade turned players off.
Yeah.
Like he robbed Aaron Gordon twice in the slam dunk contest. Like Aaron Gordon should have won one of those dunk contests because he was unbelievably good 2 years. And they robbed him. Zach LaVine won. Cool. But the next year against Derrick Jones, there was no reason why Aaron Gordon didn't win that. But it was because of Dwayne Wade. And I know for a fact that NBA players were not about to put themselves out there like that and then be basically embarrassed by Dwayne Wade or some judge that thought, well, you know, I want to give it to the understudy right here or this younger guy because that's a better story. Like, no, fuck that. I won the dunk contest. Give me the grade.
Well, because then you get ripped on Twitter, too.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, though, that Aaron Gordon diss track that came out after that was one of the greatest pieces of content.
I'm sorry, I died.
I was like, bro,
you got to let that go. You can't be recording diss tracks about the slam dunk contest.
That
he had a
was hilarious.
It was so bad.
No, it was so good,
no,
Gerald.
It was so good. It was the corniest of corny things.
It was so good. The music video,
So
the quality of everything, it was ultimate troll level, like 100.
He wasn't trolling, though. He was serious. He like meant it.
Sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
It was so good.
Even Saul, the U of A guy, is like,
we need a girth diss track.
It was so perfect. All right. The only other thing that I want to talk about around the All-Star game is we already touched on this a little bit, but the amount of love for Devin Booker. He posted on his Instagram, they had like a mural on one of the buildings in Cleveland that had him and I don't remember the other players. It was LeBron, it was probably Steph, and I think Ja was on it. And it was kind of symbolic of like, these two are the established faces currently, and then these two are like the next face of the league. It's kind of how I kind of read into it if you wanted to get real deep with it. And he said something along the lines of like, it's really cool to be basically up there with those guys. And everyone in the comment section are like, you are that guy though. Like that's the thing. And I just think this weekend kind of put him on the map a little bit more. Because you got more love from players around the league, more eyes across the world on him as well. And I just really appreciated the amount of respect for him that came from this game.
Well, even him speaking about the legends during that halftime ceremony, each one of them had to go through the line and say a little blurb. And he was one of the 4 guys that actually got to speak. And I think that speaks volumes as well, because you have the legends, like the best of the best ever, standing right behind you. And for you to have to come out and be asked to say a few words, I think the NBA, the players in the NBA, the coaches all understand the value of Devin Booker. The only people that don't are basically the East Coast media and people that are just kind of casual observers. Like they don't understand what Devin Booker really is and what he brings to the table. But people that are in the game, that's why he has so much respect from so many guys. It's because they understand how hard he works, that he's one of the best in the league, and damn it, he deserves to get recognized on this level because he is one of the top 5 guards in the league. That's indisputable. And so I'm glad he's getting this shine because he deserves it.
Yeah, this was the last couple All-Stars because he was an injury replacement. It felt like, okay, he's a young up-and-coming player. Now after a finals run, after an Olympic gold, after being voted in and deserving to be a starter, honestly, he kind of got gypped as being a reserve in this, but it just solidifies him as like, no, it's not the future, it's right now. And I think Dwayne Rankin tweeted it out that they have the different setups for the players for like media interviews for all-star players. And he was on the main one with Steph Curry, Giannis, Joel Embiid, those main like faces of the league. And he was one of those guys that was on that main stage. So that's pretty cool to see that.
If you're not a serious MVP contender, or if you're a serious MVP contender or have won the MVP or have taken your team to the NBA Finals and balled out, like you're not secondary to anybody. You're just not. And Devin Booker's approaching that echelon of not even being secondary to Steph Curry. He still got a little ways from Steph Curry, obviously, because Steph Curry's won championships and stuff like that, but and MVPs. But he's on his way. He's tracking in that direction. I feel like, and we're going to get to this here in a second, but I feel like Book understands the moment right now. Like I really, really feel like that. And I think this weekend took it just a little bit further for him. I'm very excited to see what he's going to do in the second half. And I think the Chris Paul injury is going to be such a blessing in disguise for that young guy.
In a lot of different ways, but we'll get into that in a second. So is Kevin Durant and LeBron with John Book, which makes a lot more sense, just to clear that up. Also, one thing to note, Devin finally opened up his comment section on Instagram. Oh, yeah. Which he basically had comments on his Instagram post turned off since I started following him, basically when he became a Sun. And I understand why he had that, but I think, I don't know what the move was, why he decided to open up comments again on Instagram, but I think that's a really big move. Obviously, he's going to get a lot of trash talk in some of those comments, as all players do across the league. But I think that's going to be helpful for him to just kind of build up that fan base a little bit more, like let fans feel like they can talk to him more on these different social media platforms, which is pretty great. Anything else on the All-Star break, or was you guys ready to move on?
Let's go. All right. Let's talk about the big stuff.
Okay. Well, before we do that, let me tell all the Hoops fans out there about the latest offer from DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So this one is too good to pass up. Right now, new customers can bet just $1 on any team and get $150 in free bets if they win. It is that simple. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use that promo code PHNX. And when you bet just $1 on any NBA team, you're going to get $150 in free bets if they win when you use that promo code PHNX. Now, we all know DraftKings Sportsbook is safe, it's secure, it's reliable, it's an official sports betting partner of the NBA. You can also bet on the NBA with same-game parlays, so combine multiple bets for the same game for a bigger payout. The more legs you add, obviously, the more money you can win. And best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want, which is a really great function of this app. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and don't forget to use that code PHNX. Just a reminder, that is 21 and older only, Arizona only. Gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. New customers only, minimum $5 deposit. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. So the sad part of this podcast, Chris Paul is going to be sidelined for anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, potentially longer, with a right thumb avulsion fracture. So the reports came out. He will be reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks. So we don't exactly have a full-on time frame of when he will return. Are you guys bummed? Like, scale of 1 to 10, how frustrating or worried are you?
I'm at like a 2.
A 2? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about this at all. I just am not. I mentioned it a bit ago. I feel like it's a blessing in disguise. I said yesterday with Espo on the podcast that I just feel like this is an opportunity for Chris to rest, number one, which he's going to need rest heading into the playoffs. And since Monty was trying to play him damn near 40 minutes a game, this is the best way to get it. So here we go. And you know, it's going to elevate everybody else's play, which I don't think is a bad thing. And so when Chris Paul comes in, it should be relatively easy for everybody to adjust to Chris Paul. And I think it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fine. I'd put it at about a 4 or 5. I don't think you ever want a player's projected timeline to return to be lining up with when the playoffs start. That's never an ideal situation, but you know, this team has more than enough depth to withstand that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we should probably talk about what the injury actually is, and we had a special guest help us out with that.
Yeah, so we were able to have Dr. Raj, who is a doctor of physical therapy, join us for a quick chat earlier today. So we're going to play that interview for you guys, and then we'll discuss it once we're done with that. Welcoming in Dr. Raj, doctor of physical therapy, fitness and movement coach, mindfulness, sports scientist. You can follow him on Twitter at 3CB Performance. Dr. Raj, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Hey, not too bad. I wish I was joining on better pretenses.
Yeah.
So, how y'all doing?
We're doing well, thank you. Of course, as we know, Chris Paul has suffered a right thumb avulsion fracture. So can you kind of just break this down for us? Explain exactly what that injury is.
Sure. So break is the apt term, I think. And so essentially with an avulsion, what happens is it's that either a muscle or a tendon essentially chips off a piece of the bone. And in this case, it happened at, most likely, if you looked at where he was grabbing at when the injury happened and how it happened, he was grabbing at like the base, the inner base of that thumb called the ulnar side. And so I think he jammed it. I can't remember on what specific player, one of the Rockets players. And so that can lead to the muscle chipping off a piece of that bone. And so that's why you saw him in a cast. They're allowing for that bone to heal. And then, as you guys heard about, I'm sure yesterday, that return timeline, you have to allow for bone healing. And so he'll be reevaluated in that 6 to 8 week time frame.
So with that time frame, a lot of people have been wondering about this because back in 2017, he missed, I think his original timeline was 6 to 8 weeks, but he missed like 5.5 with a UCL thumb injury, which is obviously different. But I was just curious to clear up some of that confusion. Is this a similar type of situation where he might be able to return before that projected timeline, or is it just hard to say?
So with the UCL thumb injuries, that's a ligament injury. There's actually a new technique that they use to help actually expedite that process, which is why you likely saw him come back quicker. For example, Lakers' Taylor Horton-Tucker came back in about 5 weeks with the same procedure. I think it's Dr. Shin in LA that they both use. And so that's that time frame has now kind of been outdated. Whereas when it comes to fractures, you have to allow for that bone healing. And is there always a chance that he might come back quicker? Of course, right? But we haven't really seen as much in the data. And also when it comes to these injuries, we don't really know the full specifics, whereas with the UCL thumb injury, it's a lot more specific because you know the specific ligament. All we know in this case is that, hey, he has a fracture in that thumb, and it can even come down to kind of the extent of that fracture as well. How much was chipped off, right?
Sure.
We don't know.
So best case scenario, 6 to 8 weeks. Worst case scenario, what does that kind of look like? Since we don't know, just kind of going from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Yeah, I would say best case, he's reevaluated at 6. And then typically with most apps, about a week return to play to get him back up to speed. And so you're looking at 7 weeks, which coincides with the start of the playoffs, right? Worst case scenario is that there's some complication in his rehab. There's something sometimes called a Stenner lesion, which can interfere with healing, which can push that out to 8 to 10 weeks. Although it's not all that common, and they would know that early on. I think the fact that he didn't have surgery, and he actually played in part of the All-Star game probably is a good indicator that, hey, surgery isn't required and it's not, all that significant, or they wouldn't have let him play in that game. The biggest thing to me with Chris being an older player, and you have the playoffs obviously coming up, is that getting him up to speed quickly and back in rhythm, and the fact that it's on his his dominant shooting hand is also a key consideration here, right? And so those to me are more of considerations in the actual healing process.
Sure, that makes sense. And that was kind of going to be my follow-up is, you mentioned in your video that you posted on Twitter about range of motion and that rehab and recovery process. Do you think that this is a situation where he probably won't start shooting and dribbling until after he's been reevaluated, or is that something that he can gradually work in over the next few weeks?
It's hard to say, but I think it just depends on how he recovers.
Mm-hmm.
And so with these injuries, especially at the elite pro level where you're checking in daily with the players, there's no like, oh, just come back in 3 weeks and we'll see how you are, right? Like anyone else would be. It's hey man, how you doing today? If we need imaging, we'll get the imaging. And so you can start that process whenever that healing is completed or completed to the extent that it's required. And then you're seeing indicators based on that range of motion, that strength, what that pain and discomfort level is like. And so if you start to see him back on the court prior to that 6 weeks, it's a pretty indicator that he's going to be cleared at that reevaluation point. And so those are always things to pay attention to. I think a key thing with this also is the fact that it is part of his upper body. So he can still maintain his conditioning level. Whereas let's say if it was lower body, you're going to be typically, de-weighted or not allowed to do some of that conditioning work. And that's really important for him considering the intensity of the playoffs and how much, emphasis there is on him in the playoffs, especially with this, him being on the ball as much as he is.
So what exactly does the rehab recovery process look like here? Is it just as simple as getting rest and keeping that wrist steady or that thumb steady?
No, I mean, typically, so more and more protocols now, you want to, when it's possible, get back to range of motion, strength work as quickly as you can, as quickly, of course, balancing that with the healing of the bone. And that's always the question is at what point is the bone healed enough where you can start now implementing some of that range of motion, the flexibility and the strength work back into, especially, as I said, with his right hand where the grip strength is really important for him. And so the quicker you can get back to that, the quicker typically you see returns. And the main thing with finger injuries in general is that range of motion and not letting those things stiffen up, because they will stiffen up really, really quickly. And so that's going to be the key considerations with him.
Sure. And I think we all know Chris Paul pretty well. He's a guy that will probably, even if he's not fully healed, might try to play through something if it comes to playoff time. Is there a risk of re-injury with this type of thing?
Typically not. Once the fracture's healed and he clears all the indicators, he should be good to go. It's more so of a concern if it is a ligament injury and things of that nature. But I mean, long-term with these injuries, and I mentioned this in the video, the prognosis, is quite good. And so of course he's going to miss the time, but the Suns have a 6.5 game lead, so they've earned that cushion for him. And so I think all things considered, the fact that it is just an avulsion fracture and there isn't ligament damage, those are good signs.
Is there anything else that we should be aware of with an injury like this, or any final thoughts for us?
No, I think the main thing I'd like to talk about is just, I know they gave that 6 to 8 week timeline, but once he's healed, it's really just paying attention for people who want to, really understand when he might come back. It's just focusing on, hey, is he maybe on the court more often? Is he getting some of that ball work in, right? And so that's really the true indicators that about whether he's going to return at 6 weeks or if it will be longer.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Raj, for your time and your information. We really appreciate you joining us today. And one more time for everyone listening, you can follow Dr. Raj on Twitter at 3CB Performance. He puts out a lot of great informational videos around sports and sports physical therapy. We'll see you next time. So, yeah, that was a really informative conversation, shed some light on sort of what we're dealing with here. 6 to 8 weeks, likely, potentially less, potentially more. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. And Gerald, I'm sure at practices and shoot-arounds, you'll be able to keep us updated when hopefully we see Chris Paul back out doing some court work and things of that nature.
Yeah, Chris Paul watch was already going to be underway at every practice the rest of the season, but now hearing him say that, it could be something where if that has healed, because they are checking in day to day, that's something we'll definitely want to keep an eye on. And the big thing for me was that he said the risk of re-injury is low with something like this as long as it heals properly and there's no setbacks. So that's good to hear. And now we have a lot of background on this injury and kind of what to expect moving forward.
Can't wait till the first time Chris Paul picks up a pen and signs something with his right hand and everybody loses their mind.
It's going to be great.
He's back. He's back. Like,
AZ Cards, Phoenix Suns on God said, so basically don't count on him coming back. I don't know if you're joking or being playful with that, but no. What comment?
Surgery.
Oh, if he needs surgery, he's out for the rest of the year, and that's a possibility.
If he needed surgery, he would have already probably scheduled or had surgery.
I agree. I feel like if it was to the point where they even thought he might need surgery, they probably would have just done it to be able to heal, give that more time to heal potentially.
Yeah, and basically the only reason that would even happen is if the fractured piece was so far away from the actual bone that it couldn't what do you call it?
Reattach,
heal together, solidify or whatever you call it.
Well, and like Gerald said, Dr. Raj said that there's no real risk of re-injuring or anything of that sort. So if Chris Paul knows that it can't get too much worse, he's going to push through it like he did.
There's no chance.
Like he did last year when he played through ligament damage.
Chris Paul misses the fucking playoffs.
Yeah, there's no way.
He might, depending on who they play in round one, he might miss a few games of round one, but there's just no chance after that he misses this. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
But with him sidelined for the next couple of weeks, what are some things that we might see with this team in his absence? What do you guys think?
Well, listen. There is this is the main thing, the main takeaway that I have right now. We've been talking all year about why CP3 or Devin Booker are not being seriously considered for MVP, despite the fact that they're performing at a very high level, but everybody else is getting shine. Well, it's probably because both of them kind of neutralize each other to some degree. Well, now for Devin Booker specifically, that is not the case. He has 24 games to show the world that with or without CP3 in the fold, they're going to be just fine. And I truly, truly feel like Devin realizes this is his MVP moment. This is the time where he can really assert himself and play at such a level, much like he did in the Western Conference Finals last year in games 1 and 2, where he just basically dominated those games. I could see that. And this is his moment. This is his moment. If he's going to win an MVP, this is his first real legitimate shot at winning an MVP now that Chris Paul is out of the fold.
Yeah, and it's I don't know if he'll fully submit his name the way that, because right now the top of the conversation, it goes Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Giannis, and then it's kind of everybody else. I don't know if he'll be able to throw his hat into the ring like those three, because he does have some ground to make up, even though he's arguably the best player on the best team. But Kendrick Perkins did agree with you to a certain extent.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that he does have on his side is that a lot of media members are paying attention to this right now, and they're already starting the conversation about him trying to kind of put his name in that hat, like you said. So let's hear what Kendrick Perkins had to say about it.
I believe Devin Booker is a superstar. Stephen A., you believe that Devin Booker is a superstar. Molly, you believe that Devin Booker is a superstar. Now it's time for Devin Booker to prove to us that he's a superstar, that he could be a superstar and win games without Chris Paul. Because no matter how we want to look at it, the fact of the matter is that Devin Booker has not showed us that he's capable of winning games without Chris Paul yet. And this is his time to show us that he's capable of being not only a superstar and getting buckets, but being the leader of this team and going out there and keeping the boat afloat and going out there and leading his team to victories.
So at least they're paying attention. At least this is a topic of conversation that will hopefully have more people watching what Devin Booker, that we've seen him do for a while now.
I will disagree with Perk on one point, is that he has shown that he can lead this team to victory despite the fact Chris Paul not being there. I just mentioned it last year in the Western Conference Finals. Like, he balled out those first couple games without CP3 in the fold. And even during the Lakers series, CP3 was definitely not there. He's even admitted that he had basically no use of his arm in that series. And Devin Booker if we all remember, he started off with a 3-point barrage, and I think Game 6, and basically cemented their win over the Lakers. Like, he's been able to do it. Now, this is going to be for a longer stretch of time. Mm-hmm. This is during the regular season, not the playoffs. So, we all know that players get up for bigger games than normal. And it's funny that you mentioned Embiid and all those other guys, because he literally is going to play all 3 of those guys in these next 24 games as well. He's got a matchup at the Nuggets. He's got a matchup at the Milwaukee Bucks, and he's got home against the 76ers. I'm excited to see how Devin Booker performs, and not to mention one more game against the Warriors in San Francisco, which those 4 games right there are the 4 games that I'm kind of looking towards, because if he can come out 3-1, 4-0, and dominate in those games, I think you can all but assure yourself of an MVP trophy for Devin Booker.
Yeah, I think, 40-point triple-double in Game 1 of the conference finals, that 46 or 48-point barrage against the Lakers to close them out. Like, he doesn't have to prove anything, but if he does want to be a legitimate MVP contender, this is his opportunity to do so. And it'll be exciting to see not just him, but also some of these other younger players get that chance to prove, like, okay, yes, Chris Paul coming here changed the culture. It taught us how to win, but it's not just Chris Paul. Like, these young guys are actually really talented and can win games on their own now. So we're going to get to see that. And with Book specifically, we should point out we might get to see more point Book lineups. And so far this year, we've only seen 34 minutes of them.
Saul.
We've only seen 34 minutes of them. They're +9 in that time. And the point Book lineup against the Rockets the other night was what saved the game. We might see those lineups in a pinch. The Suns are getting guys back, so that's good for their backcourt. But Monty has shown that he's not afraid to turn to that in a pinch, especially with Chris Paul not out there.
I think one of the things, too, that is really beneficial that we've seen recently, because I feel like a lot of times where you're going to miss Chris Paul are in those clutch time moments. Mm-hmm. Crunch time Suns, like Chris Paul seems to be the leader of that group. Devin Booker obviously shines in there as well. But we saw, some moments where Mikal Bridges knocked down a really important shot. Those guys like Mikal, Cam, Jay, they're not afraid. Not that they were afraid, but Monty's kind of said this. It's that they have more confidence in themselves now to take those shots, to make those plays in those moments. So we've seen that growth from them throughout the season. So now that Chris Paul won't be available in those minutes, it's not like these guys will be as nervous maybe or just unsure of themselves in those moments. I think they've got a lot more confidence.
There's no way that happens at all. Like, Cam and Mikal specifically are ready. They're ready to take that next step and help carry more of the load than maybe in years past. Mm-hmm. And DA, listen, another guy that you're going to point to during this stretch of games is, you talk about wanting that money. You have to envision a scenario where Chris Paul's not part of this franchise. At some point, are these core four that you're going to ride with basically for the next decade? Mm-hmm. And DA is got to do his part in performing to that level and doing that. Like, he's got to prove that. And I know it's shitty. It's shitty that we have to sit here and say, well, you got to prove it over and over and over again. And it feels like you're kind of moving the goalposts. But again, opportunities present themselves, and you can either take advantage of it or you don't. And if you don't, it's not going to look good on your future prospects here with the Phoenix Suns. So I would say DA understands that as well. He's willing to help out Devin Booker as much as he possibly can, and he'll probably step up his level of play. These 4, those are the 4 that I'm always going to look towards when it comes to this stretch of games, to kind of providing the blueprint of what is in the future for this franchise. Because we long have been saying we have set ourselves up for a possible run here. Well, these 4 guys are going to be a major, major part of that run, and really the core of that run. We get a nice little sneak peek into that future right here.
Right.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, they're the present and the future, and everybody's going to look to Book as the guy that needs to step up with Chris Paul out, but I'm looking just as much to Mikal, Cam, and DA like you're talking about. So the 3 stats that I pinpointed for these guys: Mikal Bridges over the last 11 games, averaging 19 points, 5.5 rebounds, shooting 62% from the field. He's been getting in a flow, and I think the Suns have been putting an emphasis on getting him more involved offensively to see what he can do for those scenarios in the playoffs when teams hone in on Devin Booker and Chris Paul. And so far, he's been doing very well with that. So I'm excited to see if he can continue that going forward, because he scored in double figures in every single game over those last 11. Cam Johnson, he's not going to be starting with Chris Paul out, but in his 10 games as a starter, when he had more minutes like he's probably going to be getting now that CP3 is out, he averaged 17 points, 5.5 rebounds, shot 55% from the floor, 50% from three. He's proven that if you give him minutes, he will produce. And so it's exciting to have both of those guys on the wings that are capable of producing their own offense, attacking closeouts, and kind of hopefully by committee making up for some of the ball movement and the offense that Chris Paul creates. And then with DA, this is a huge test for DA, like you said, especially because you look at his field goals. Chris Paul has assisted on 121 of his 266 made field goals. So that's almost 50%. So he's losing a guy who routinely sets him up. Now it's the chance for Devin Booker and DA to cement their chemistry that we've seen them have. It's a chance for him to maybe initiate some of his own offense, like a lot of people have been wanting to see from him. He is a guy that gets a lot of his offense from just setting good screens and rolling and cleaning up around the basket, but we might see him do a little bit more than we've seen in the past. So it's going to be fascinating to watch all three of those youngsters in addition to Devin Booker trying to make this MVP push.
But we obviously can't ignore the elephant in the room of when it's not Point Book,
yes,
who is the point guard of this team.
Oh my God, I'm going to lose my mind with this Point Book stuff.
Point
Book is like, I get why people want to say Point Book, because they're like, oh, it's obvious he's bringing the ball up, so he's a Point Book. I'm like, okay, cool. He brings the ball up. When you're heading down the stretch of this season, the other thing you can't do is wear out Booker. Like you just can't, because otherwise you're just completely screwing yourself. So I hope that Monty will not allow Devin Booker to really have to bring the ball up, especially when guys are trying to play him full court and all this other stuff. Like take the ball out of his hands. Now, when you get actually to your set and having him kind of establish the flow of it, then cool, that's fine. And I think that's what people are looking at with Point Book versus not Point Book. If you have to rely on Point Book, you're fucked. You are. You have to have Aaron Holiday, Cam Payne, and those guys step up and be able to handle those Chris Paul minutes more than you need Devin Booker to prove that he can do that. Because if you have to have Point Book for 80% of the missed Chris Paul minutes, you're going to have a extremely tired and fatigued Point Book when we get to the playoffs.
You're only using Point Book in a pinch if, like, Campaign is not ready for Thursday's game to come back, or if Aaron Holiday is having a bad night and you don't want to turn to Elfrid Payton. Like, that's what happened in the Rockets game. Like, they didn't want to go back to Elfrid Payton. Aaron Holiday can play off the ball a little bit. So even if Holiday is bringing the ball up the court, it was still Booker who was initiating most of the offense, making the reads, the playmaking, that type of thing, because he is a very good playmaker, because he was pigeonholed in as a point guard for that one season where the Suns point guards were just trash. So he has the playmaking skills. I'm not saying they need to be running Booker at the one exclusively, but Point Book in a pinch is definitely a lineup that could work for you. And historically, it's checked out very well as far as, beating its opponents in a pinch. It's not going to be the majority of the minutes because, and this is a good segue, Campaign is supposed to come back soon, and Landry Shamet is supposed to come back as well. And that's going to be huge. I know you're already laughing at the Shamet thing, but Campaign coming back is going to be big, especially if he's ready for Thursday, as I think John Gamadoro reported.
I'm not laughing at the Shamet thing, because I think, maybe to a degree here, when you see CP3 go out, you would like to think that Shamet would have changed his mindset anyway during the season. Mm-hmm. But now there's a reality that hits you in the face that if I don't perform at a high level or a high enough level, I become Elfrid Payton essentially, and I could be looking at not even being in the league here soon, because $40 million ain't going to cut it at that rate. You know what I'm saying? So there's a stark reality for Shamet right now, and I would hope that he comes back ready to go and performs at a higher level. I think this break probably did him some good, because he just, for whatever reason, there was just no flow to his game whatsoever. It seems like he's playing way too fast, and I think he's going to settle down a little bit more. Book's going to need his guys to step up. Everybody's got to step up at this point. I don't see, for Devin Booker to win MVP, I don't think he needs to average like 35 to 40 a game or anything like that. I think he just needs to average between 25 and 30, not 20. We'd be sorely mistaken there. 25 to 30, but it's the other stats, the rebounds and the assists, and even the steals that he's got to pick up to a certain degree. If he was averaging somewhere between 6 to 8 assists a game and maybe elevating his rebounds to 7 to 9, somewhere in that range, I think now you're talking about him playing at a higher level overall because of his assists pickup. That means he's looking for his other teammates and he's not just going one-on-one. And that's my fear with the point book for every now and then. And you've even seen it with Chris Paul in the lineup at the end of game situations. We've gone back to the 2018 book where it was like ISO at the top of the key, him trying to make a play. And typically that just hasn't felt like it's worked out. But the times he's thrived is he plays within the system and he finds and picks his moment, and then he attacks hard instead of just kind of waiting the clock out. And that's what I think Devin Booker is best at, is playing off of the ball, and then when he gets it with like 5 seconds left, as opposed to just at the top of the key waiting for the clock to go down and then kind of pigeonholing himself into a bad situation, which I feel like he has a tendency to do from time to time.
Well, yeah, but those are the isolated scenarios because you look at how well he shot in the clutch. It's not like that's a play that they're running a ton. We should also point out, like, just from a team perspective, yes, we would love to see Devin Booker in the MVP conversation, but just like from the basic perspective of the Suns holding on to the 1 seed, like if they go 12-12 over their last 24 games, if they go 500, the Warriors would have to go 18-3 just to catch them. So this 6.5 game cushion that they've given themselves is huge because even if, Booker doesn't thrive and the young guys kind of struggle and they play 500 basketball, this team is still in really good position to lock up the 1 seed, even if all of those bad things happen. So we're still in a very good spot, even if Book is not like, blowing our socks off. But I still think
if the Suns went 12-12, your Suns fandom is going to lose their minds. I don't see that happening, obviously. You're not saying it's going to happen. Right, I'm just saying, like, we're playing what if, worst case scenarios. I expect them to go at worst 18-6 down the stretch.
I mean, they're going to drop a few games. It's inevitable here.
Maybe.
But if they were to drop a few games, I feel like it would happen later this week, next week, as they're trying to really figure things out and get that flow. And then obviously, depending on Campaign coming back, Landry Shamet coming back, I know there were reports about them being ready to go for this Thursday's game, but you just don't know for sure.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten any confirmation on that.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any confirmation from the Suns. That was a report from Gambo, but it did seem like Landry Shamet, based on what we had seen from them in practice, that both were working on their conditioning, and Shamet looked good. He looked like he was probably ready to play. Campaign, I'd say he's pretty close.
2 words I didn't think I was going to hear this week.
And like the Suns, like they have the 6th easiest remaining schedule,
right, which is another huge factor in this.
They'll be fine.
Okay, real quick, I just want to remind everyone out there that children 5 and older are eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccine is the best tool we have to reduce the chances of getting sick with COVID-19. The COVID-19 vaccine can reduce the risk of being hospitalized or dying from the disease. Safe, free, and highly effective COVID-19 vaccines are available throughout Arizona. Visit azhealth.gov/findvaccine for a location near you. You guys can get vaxxed and boosted and ready for the playoffs that will be here in no time. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, on this whole situation?
I do just want to clear up for the chat. I'm not saying they're going to go 12-12. Everybody's saying there's no way they're going 12. I'm saying in like a worst case scenario where they turn into a 500 team.
Right. Worst case scenario, we still have.
Yeah, the Warriors still have to go 18-3 just to catch. So I'm not saying they're going to go 12-12. I think they're going to be better than that, but just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah. Yes. I know we have a tendency to be like doomsdayers or whatever, people by nature. I've never really tried to be on that boat. I've looked at the glass half full most of the time, and this is another situation where I think opportunity presents itself for guys to really step up and make more of a name than they already have. Like Mikal's had a great season. Cam has played very well this season. Like DA's been okay. Like these are the guys that you need to step up, and I believe they will. And I look at this more of, this is going to be fun to watch, to see how this works out without Chris Paul, as opposed to, oh shit, we're completely screwed. Like I don't see it that way. And so I know these guys are excited too. Like, okay, Everybody talks about how we can't win without Chris. Everybody wants to be like, oh, we couldn't win because we didn't have Jamal Murray and we didn't have Anthony Davis got hurt. You know what? The Suns can be like, yeah, we lost Chris Paul for 24 games and we were still the best team in the league. You guys can all suck it.
That's what I'm most looking forward to, is that hopefully this team does succeed within this time frame pretty well without Chris Paul. And that's not any shade at Chris Paul by any means. It's just that it cements a little bit more, I think, in certain people's minds, that even when Chris Paul does maybe have to play less minutes down the road, or when he's no longer playing in this league, the Suns are still a bona fide team. They're still going to be able to do like championship level things. Mm-hmm. So I'm also really excited to see what Aaron Holiday does, because I feel like he's going to get a lot more minutes. So
Aaron Holiday is
that'll
big
be a fun
now.
One.
That was a big pickup, and I feel like Campaign, if he continues what he was doing before he got hurt in that 10 or so games, because he was getting his season on track, they'll be just fine if they get those two things.
Yep. All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in to today's show. If you're listening to this on audio, don't forget to rate and review. We appreciate your support. If you have not recently checked out gophnx.com, head on over there, check out all our new merch, Gerald's new articles. Tomorrow we will have an audio only episode for you guys, and then tomorrow we'll let you know what the rest of the week kind of looks like. Until then, you can always follow us on Twitter, the show at PHNX_Suns, myself at Lindsey Smith AZ, Saul at Saul_Bookman, and Gerald at Gerald Bourguet. Anybody want to ahoy us home?
Hell no. Bye.